How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we've got an installation video and we've got our in-house engineer Connor with us today. Connor, what are we doing?
So 4runner Kai bought an Auxbeam unit and we are going to be installing this in the vehicle. And one of the really nice things about this Auxbeam unit is you get rid of all these extra relays and you're basically just putting everything onto one board. So you're just gonna see two cables going to your battery and it's gonna look really clean.
Exactly. Everybody in the off-road and overlanding community knows as soon as you start adding auxiliary lighting or anything that requires a power draw, the wires start crossing and it starts turning into a rat's nest. And the best way to fix that is with a switch panel. Let's get started.
All right, so here's the unit right here. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the box and just kind of show you what's included. So, got some stickers. These stickers will actually go on this panel. So you've got a pretty good variety, whether you're doing ditch lights or light bar, that's really nice to have. This unit actually will go in the car with you, and it comes with a harness that the unit will plug into to communicate with your main relay box. So this is your main relay box. You got fuses and solid state relays in them. So all of your loads will just get connected right here, the positive and negatives. Very nice little piece here. And then we just got some various parts of the harness, like the main cables that are going to be powering the Auxbeam, and then you got a couple of little odds and end ignition wires to power it up. And then you have a circuit breaker. And on the circuit breaker, it's a resettable circuit breaker, so it's really nice in case you overload it. And then we got a couple of brackets here and a nice little cover for the Auxbeam unit itself. And then underneath it all is your mounting brackets, and they actually place a sticker on here to let you know that there's still something else below the foam. And so there is what we're going to be working with here. Now let's come over to the tools and I'll just kind of tell you what we need. So we're going to need a 10 and 12 millimeter socket to loosen the battery terminals, as well as connect in the cables. And then we have a drill with a Phillips head on it just to remove some existing hardware. And then we got our electrical tools. This is just kind of a variety. You got some crimpers, strippers, and just kind of, it really comes down to personal preference, but I like to use these, so we're gonna roll with these. They're a crimper and a stripper. And that's all you need for the install. It goes really quick, it's really simple. All right, so we have Kylie's hood popped and we're looking underneath the hood at all the wiring. So as you can see, you got a couple light bars connections, you got a nice long harness. And by installing this Auxbeam, we're basically going to eliminate all this extra wiring. It's gonna be nice and cleaned up in one little spot. So we're basically gonna take this and I think we're gonna mount it right here. So it's accessible and you can still access wires and be able to change fuses on it. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're gonna locate where we wanna put this, as we kind of talked about before. I'm basically gonna be putting it right here. So in that case, we're actually gonna have to move this to another spot since this will be taking up that space. So we'll start with that. We actually have a ground that we're going to have to relocate as well. So I'm thinking we can move this over to the ground on the firewall. And this is for your blinkers and your brake lights. So these are going to get moved as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this bracket in now. We're going to use the existing hole from that module that I just pulled out, so we don't have to drill as many holes. So in the included hardware, there are nuts and bolts. So you got a bolt and then you got some washers and nuts, and we're just gonna basically mount this to the plate. And we will go through and clean up this wiring. I'm just trying to get a fitment. now what we're gonna do is we're gonna install the circuit breaker and we're gonna install these cables. So you're gonna see that you have 2 red cables, and this circuit breaker is going to bolt right in the middle. And then these are gonna run from the battery to the Auxbeam unit. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now that we have the unit installed and we kind of know where everything's gonna be run, we're gonna go ahead and install the circuit breaker. So the circuit breaker is resettable, and you'll notice that you have 2 red cables, and the circuit breaker is meant to go right in the middle of them. And so each end, one end's gonna run from the battery to the Auxbeam, and the same for the negative terminal lead. So we'll go ahead and do that. Before we start installing this, I think this is something that's pretty notable. It's a good idea to take your lead cables and just see the sizing of the holes on the terminals, and you'll see that there are 2 out of the 2 of these terminal leads out of the 6 that are on all 3 wires or cables that are actually larger. So 2 of these are larger than the other 4, and these are the ones that are going to go right here on the battery connections. Okay, now we're going to pop the cover off of the Auxbeam so we can get access to these terminals right here. And all we are going to do, and also remember, we're not running power to this first. This isn't doing anything, so it's safe to kind of just leave an end dangling. But we're going to route this wire up through, and then we are going to bolt it in to this terminal. And this is another thing that is really nice about doing switch panels like the Auxbeam. It eliminates the amount of connections that you have running to the battery. So instead of having 5 or 6 connections, you're only having 1 large connection, and that goes back to this panel. All right, now we're going to install the breaker, and with the breaker you just have a bolt going in and a bolt coming out. So we'll just pull the nuts off of that. See, I'm just making sure there isn't a route it has to go. Okay. All right, so again, just remember you got these larger leads for the battery terminal, so we're going to put this on the smaller one. And we're just going to throw the nut back on. And before we tighten this down, I just want to kind of just check the path that we want this to take. And so I'm just going to lightly make them finger tight, and we can kind of see how we want this to mount. Now ideally, I'd really like this to mount on the sidewall right here. And so we're just gonna have to find a way to manipulate that down. And that'll be a lot easier kind of once we get all these wires cleaned up. We'll be able to mount this right here. So we're gonna kind of mount this down like this for now and make sure that this plastic cover will clear it. And if not, we'll just kind of figure it out as we go. And okay, that's gonna do it right there. Okay. Then we're gonna make this other cable just sit flat and go straight out. We'll replace these rubber pieces. Okay, so we're going to leave the breaker open, and we are going to just kind of start routing our wiring. So we're going to start with the longest path first. So we're just going to try and route this cable so we can take this over to our power terminal on the battery. So we're just going to kind of maneuver this in and make sure it'll sit nice and flat, just like that. So we'll have your power run here, and remember, breaker is open, so we're okay to do that. It's always safe just to leave the breaker open until you are ready to test everything. So this is really personal preference at this point, but you can either put it on the negative terminal of the battery or you can actually mount it to the sidewall. I usually, since we're doing the power lead here, I'm just going to run this as well. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the negative terminal of the battery first, so we can just disconnect the battery. And you don't have to take this nut all the way off, you just got to loosen it enough that you can pull the terminal off just like that. Okay, so now that we've got the negative terminal of the battery disconnected, we're going to go ahead and connect the red lead here. I'm just going to do that by finger tight. And And this is another nice thing about this Auxbeam is you can see all these wires right here just kind of crammed onto this little screw. This is going to get rid of all of these and they're going to move onto this panel so you don't have issues with your terminals coming loose on your battery. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing and we are going to put the negative on. And I know I sound like a broken record, but leave this circuit breaker open. So you see reset, that means there's no connection there. So once we put the battery back together, it'll just, we'll be able to flip that breaker if we want to turn it on, but we just want to leave it off for now, just for safety. Just tighten this back down. And another reason, and another thing with this is I also took the negative lead off the terminal, is because when you start unbolting this 12 millimeter nut, you're going to start hearing it pop and crackle, and I just don't like hearing that, so I just disconnected it, the full battery, and we'll just put this back on now. And no crackling, and we're just going to tighten this 10 millimeter head back down. You can see once we get into this, we are going to start removing these negative leads. Okay. Since we're here, we're basically just going to loosen this all the way up and we're just going to pull these wires off. And these are just going to rest back here. Since they're going to be going onto the Auxbeam, we're just going to leave them tucked back here and we're going to tighten this back up. And you can already see just how much cleaner this looks, with getting rid of 2 wires on the battery. We'll do the same here with your negative. Now this will come back here and we'll just tighten this back up. Okay. All right, so next what we are going to do is we are going to install the button pad. So we're gonna have to go into the cab and we're also gonna have to run this wire, or this group of wires through the firewall and up into the Auxbeam unit. And if you can see here, you got the white plug with 4 pins on it, and that's gonna plug in right there. So we are going to pull the harness that connects the button pad to the Auxbeam unit, and we're gonna run it through the firewall. So you got 2 different points. You got the main harness coming through right here, and then you've also got another point, another hole you can kind of see right there. And I'm just gonna run it through the separate hole. I think it's a little easier to push things through that way. So we're gonna try and work that through, and then we're gonna go inside and see if we can fish it through. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so basically gone through and I fished this through. And it's really easy. You got 2 different points that you can fish through, and they're just 2 holes. You'll see wires going in and out of them, and that's where you can feed these through. And this is a nice small connector head, so it'll fit through really easy. Really the hardest part is just finding it up under the dash. It should be located a little bit by where your emergency brake pedal is, and then you can pull it through. And then from there, you really can route it wherever you want. Kylie actually said that she likes the idea of mounting it right here, so we're going to try and figure something out for that. So we're going to plan on running the wiring up into the dash right here, and we'll go from there. So we're basically going to install the button pad right here, and in the kit it includes these short little coarse threaded screws, and so we're just basically going to screw right into the top here. But before we do that, we are actually going to pull this panel away and just make sure that there's no wiring sitting behind here that could get damaged. So how we're going to do that is we're just going to reach in right by the center column, and we're just going to pull, and you're just going to see everything kind of start popping out. So that way we can now kind of pop everything down, and we can reach up in there and just make sure that there's no electrical components or wires that are in the way. And by feeling that, there are no wires that will come in contact with these screws. So since we do have this down here, we are actually going to install the pad, and then we're going to run that cable. So let's see, where did it go? We're going to run the cable I just pulled through. We're actually going to run it up through here and have it come out right here. And we'll actually mount this, and this will go in there. So you won't have to drill any holes other than putting the screws in here. And at this point, like wherever you want to put the pad is really personal preference. Kylie just wants it right here. There's plenty of room on this, plenty of slack that you can put it really anywhere. If you want it on your dash or by your knee, you can really set it up however you want. Okay. So I'm just going to take this utility knife, and I'm just going to kind of clean that edge up so the bracket will lay flat. And we'll screw this down on the center hole. Oh, sorry. Oh, shook. I even swore.
No, it's okay.
Okay. We want to screw it in enough that it will tighten down, but we don't want to screw it in too much where it will strip out. So now that we kind of have this, you know, sitting in a nice spot, we are going to just kind of make sure that the angle's good. So I think that'll be just fine. And we'll just drop this other screw in. Okay. Just like that. We're in. So now that we got the panel installed, we are going to route this up to meet this. We're just going to plug it in together up at the top, and then we'll push the wiring back down. So okay, so we got this through. We're just going to connect this together. And you'll see on the pad, when you're looking at the connector, there's actually a notch, which is called a key on the connector, so you can't plug it in wrong. You'll put that together, and then you'll just screw it all together. It's nice and tight. Now, kind of route the wiring down here. So tuck this wiring back in, get that bulky connector out of the way. There you have it. Pull that off, and there we go. Okay, everything just pops back in, and the pad is now installed. Okay, so now that we've run the cable into the firewall and through the firewall into the cabin, this is the other end of that cable, and we're just going to plug it in right here until you hear it click. And then once you've gotten it to click, you're just going to kind of help the wire sit over here. And now, if you have a lot of slack, which you probably will, this cable's meant for many different vehicles, you basically can now just go back into the cabin and just feed all the slack through, and you can just zip tie and tuck everything up under the dash so you don't just have a bunch of wiring messes up here. So, so now we basically have to take, this is our ignition cable, so this is going to turn the pad on whenever you turn on your key switch. And this will just be personal preference. A lot of people, some people will like to be able to run the vehicle all the time, so you just run this straight to a 12 volt, but that'll mean your pad will be on all the time. But if you plug it in right here, you can tap it into your ignition. That's actually the way we're going to run this. So we'll go ahead and show you how to do that. Okay, so now you can kind of see we've got, you know, your old harness for the light bar on the roof out of the way. We're going to wire in this ignition wire. And the nice thing about this is they've given you plenty of extra slack. We're not going to need all this, so we can just cut it down to whatever length we need it. It's always wise to keep it longer than shorter, because the shorter you go, you're not going to be able to get that extra back without putting a butt splice in. So we're just going to run that through here and tie it in. So we're going to pull this stuff out of the way, and we are going to open up the fuse box. And here we go. Okay. So this is our wire we're going to be tapping into. And the thing that's going to be kind of a necessity on this is we're going to basically cut this cable right here, and we're just going to splice this and this together into the same fuse. This is not the power for the module. The power is coming from these cables. This is just basically going to tell the Auxbeam to turn on when you turn the key switch on. So it's only just sending a little bit of a signal that's not really going to be pulling any significant power. And so we can just tie these two together with one simple butt splice, and we can get rid of an old thing that just kind of isn't doing much anyways. So we'll go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do now is we are going to replace this add-a-fuse just with the one that came in the kit. We are actually adding a little bit of heat shrink on this. You can pick this up online in the store. The thing that's really nice about what we look for is if you type in heat shrink with adhesive on the inside, whenever you heat it up with the heat gun, it'll actually basically shrink, and there's glue lined on the inside, so this will make a waterproofing seal. So we're going to add that on, but we're just going to use the crimp that came with the kit. So we're going to pull the INJ fuse, and this already has a crimp on the end of it, and we are just going to replace these fuses. We're going to put those in this double stack, and we are just going to run with the new one. So we are going to first cut the wire. So we're just going to take these cutters. We're just going to cut that. Okay, so now we're going to strip the wire. And you don't need to strip it a ton, but we're just going to make sure that this is routed well, just clean. That's what we're going for on this build. If we got the Auxbeam, all these other little wires are going to make a difference. So we're going to run these two together, just to make sure that they look good. So you can kind of see got the wire coming down through the box, and we will run this right up to where this will sit. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and cut, and just remember, as you cut things, you know, you can always cut more off, you just can't ever get more back. So make sure you get that measured out. And now we're going to just strip these wires. When you strip these wires, make sure that you're using the right gauge for the stripper. You can usually find the wire size on the wire itself. It'll say like 16 or 18, and then you just look at the stripper tool that you're using and just use the same thing. And that'll just make it so you don't take any wire out when you're stripping it. So we're going to twist these together now. Okay, and we have our heat shrink already on the wire. We're going to put this in, and we're going to crimp the wire. And you can see on these tools, you're going to be able to see there's a bare crimp and an insulated crimp. Since we got an insulated crimp, we're going to use that. And we're going to just crimp it nice and tight. And a good thing to always do whenever you're crimping or stripping wires is you want to just give it a nice tug. If you can tug it and it pulls out, it means you didn't do a tight enough crimp and you just need to redo it. But just make sure you get a nice tight crimp, and twisting those wires together will make sure one wire won't come out. They'll both have to come out, and then you'll just slip your heat shrink over just like that. Grab our heat gun, and we're just going to heat this up. Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to add this fuse in here. This came with the add a fuse, and we're just going to plug this in. And it's supposed to fit tight, so if it's giving you trouble, it means it's doing its job. There we go. Okay, and we're just going to plug this back in. Just like that. Okay, so now we've successfully added the trigger, and now we can just kind of, reroute stuff, make it look good. And that's just going to take a little bit of time. But now that we actually have this, right now we've only got one thing that we're hooking in, and that's the light bar. But Kylie's going to be adding other devices, like other lights, to her switch panel that she'll want to put in. And we can basically just go ahead and add those in as she puts them on, but we're just going to do this one for right now. So to add this in, we basically have to go to this relay, and we are going to just cut this jacket back. And we are going to try and figure out what wires we need. And it's actually really simple. We'll just pull this heat shrink back, pull that out. There we go. And you can see this is pretty hard to get off, and that's because it has the adhesive lined heat shrink. And all we really need to know is where the power is coming and where it's going. So, okay, here we go. So now we can see the wires right here. So you can see you got power, ground, and so all we're really looking for is the power and the ground. And so a couple of ways you can kind of tell. This is your power going in from your battery, and that's going to go into your relay. And out of your relay, you're going to have your switch, and then you're going to have your power. And the way you can kind of tell which one's which is you want to just take one of the leads, one of the ends, and just follow it back. And since Kylie has the switch wired in the cab, this is actually the one that is our switch. And we're just going to unhook it, pull the wiring out, and now we know that your wire runs up to your roof top light bar. So now what we're going to do, this is not connected, mind you, so if you're doing this, make sure you disconnect the power and ground, but we are basically just gonna kind of come in and we're just gonna cut the wire back. And before I actually cut that, we're just gonna route the wire. We're gonna give it a little slack just in case you do it wrong, and you can actually have it follow the OEM harness. You can kind of see this follows the firewall, but you just want it to come up. Since this is like a rooftop light bar, it's gonna be one of your 40-inch light bars. You're gonna wanna run it to one of the 30 amp outputs just to be safe. And so just get a little bit of extra slack. You come right here and you'll cut the wires right here. And then we're just gonna strip the leads. Okay, and you can really strip it as much as you want, but what you're usually gonna do is you're just gonna twist the wires and you're just gonna put them directly into the terminal block. What we are going to do actually is we are going to use what are called Ferrule Bay crimps, and they just kind of clean up the whole thing a lot. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna take one of these out and just make sure it's your right size. And we can see these blue ones are gonna be the right size. And I'll show you just how much cleaner this turns out. And the nice thing with these is you can really strip them as much as you want. So we'll strip it out to here, for example, on both of them. And now we're going to add these Ferrule Bay crimps on. Twist the wire, throw this over, and you'll see that the wire's poking out the top, which is exactly what you want. We put these on, and then with the kit you buy online, you know, wherever, usually they'll come with the tool. They'll come with a kit and they'll come with a tool, and this really cleans things up, and it actually makes things just way more simple. And you can kind of see how easy it is. You put the crimp on, put it in the tool, and all you do is you pull the lever. And so now you can see you got just a little bit of excess on top, and all you need to do at this point is just trim it up. So you can kind of see these wires are right there. You do not want that going down into your fuse box, so try and pull it out of the vehicle and just clip the tip off. And you just try and clean it up a little bit, just like that. Okay. So now that we got these cleaned up, all these are gonna do, they're gonna go right up into the newly installed Auxbeam. We are going to put them in this final position on the fuse block, and we're gonna use the screwdriver that they provided in the kit. We're gonna loosen the terminals. Loosen them up pretty good. Okay, I'm just gonna set the screwdriver right there. And we'll just pull extra through and push this into position. And I'm gonna tighten down the negative. Okay, so now we're gonna do the positive side. Just gonna loosen it up nice and good, and we'll push this in. You just wanna make sure that it goes in. Sometimes you just gotta unscrew it more too, and then just tighten it down. Okay, and just like with the butt splice, you're just gonna tug on it and make sure that it's tight. It's a tight connection, and then you're good. Okay, before we tidy everything up, I mean, obviously we still have some work to do, but you can actually see this is the old harness that we just pulled out. You got rid of a relay, you got rid of a switch, and just all this extra stuff, including the fuse. All of this fits right here on one of 8 spots on the board. So this is definitely a worthwhile investment, especially if you want to have a nice clean look under the hood. But now that we've kind of gone through, we've installed everything, we can now go ahead and test how this works. So we're gonna go ahead and close this breaker, and we're good. Everything's looking good. And you just wanna kind of do a quick little look over, make sure everything's plugged in and there are no issues. And now we're gonna come into the vehicle and we are just gonna turn on your ignition switch and see if we can get the pad to light up. Okay, so now that we're in the vehicle, we're just gonna make sure that the Auxbeam is turned on. Since we are in the 30 amp position, for the light bar, it is going to be number 1. We are just going to put the key in, turn it on. You can see that this turned on with the ignition, which is what we wanted. And we're just gonna press the 1 and you should see the light bar turn on. Okay, so we have run all your wiring in the Auxbeam. I'll pop this cover off and you can kind of see. And you can see here, we've run our triggers and we have run our light bar load. And so, like I was saying before, everything is labeled with what kind of load it can handle. You got spare fuses, you got a fuse puller as well. And it all just snaps down onto the cover like that. So now that we have that out of the way, it's time to mount the breaker. And when you're mounting the breaker, whether it's in a 4runner or another vehicle, you just want to make sure when you're mounting this that everything clears your strut under your hood. And so we kind of went through and kind of determined that this spot right here is both going to clear the strut and you will still be able to pull the fuse box cover off. And we're just going to mount it straight to the sidewall. And we're going to do that using the 2 screws that are provided in the kit and a Phillips head on a drill. So we're just going to go ahead and throw those on really quick. Just like that. We'll get the other screw in as well. Okay, there we go. So, got to give it the tug, give it the reassurance. You can close your breaker and you can put your cover on.
Okay, everybody, there you have it. So after those simplification processes to make all of your wiring look a lot better and set you up to where you can now have the opportunity to have more auxiliary lighting, more things to draw power, wasn't all in all too hard of an install. What do you think?
No, honestly, it's a pretty simple install, especially if you're starting just bone stock. You'll just get to add all your wiring around it. Really, it's just making sure that the hood clears. That's one of the biggest things, and that you're just being safe while you're installing it.
Awesome. I think the next thing to do on this 4runner is start to add more auxiliary lighting. As always, thank you guys so much for watching the video today. Be sure to like and subscribe and let us know what installation videos you guys would like to see.